Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Saturn Sirens. Today, we're going to do something different. We're including our faces so you can kind of see our facial expressions and everything. I think that'll be fun. We also last week included a new series thing that we're doing called the weekly forecast. We're going over different like an astrological weather forecast for the week. So that was really cool. It was a lot of fun. We're going to do it again every week. Also, I just want to say hi to everyone from all of the countries that we're reaching. We're reaching so many countries. We've reached 10 countries. A new one is Saudi Arabia this week that we got. So, hi from Thai to Saudi Arabia. And we're reaching 26 states. So, obviously, I want to get to all 50. So, let's send these to our friends in other states. Today we're going to be talking about the seventh house. So we're over halfway done with going over all of the houses, and this one's a good one, I think. So I'm going to send it over to Mary.
Hi, guys. So, the seventh house rules our relationships, our partnerships. Basically, any close one on one relationship is usually represented in this house. So, the opposite house, which is the first house, really represents you the most. It's how you show up in the world, it's how you look, it's the body. The seventh house is what is not you. So, it's very broad and it represents the other. So, the other meaning your marriage partner, your business partner, pretty much all of your close relationships, and it also represents your open enemies. So, it's kind of an anomaly. Why we put the marriage partner and the open enemies in the same house? I feel like that's kind of like a catch 22, but many times when your partner has planets in your seventh house, sometimes you can end up becoming enemies. So, usually, the sign that's on the cusp of the seventh house is what we are unconsciously or subconsciously attracted to and attracting towards us. So I've heard this defined many different ways. Some astrologers think that it's the shadow traits that we disown in ourselves that we look for in others, which is why it kind of makes you feel like complete when you attract somebody who has those qualities of your seventh house sign. But what if you have planets here? So if you have planets here or like your north or south node, then that's of course going to make that a key area of life for you in this lifetime. Usually, the planets manifest as events, and they usually become activated through transits. When transits make aspects to those planets, and also when people come into our life and make aspects to those planets. The seventh house shows the overall tone of your relationships that you're experiencing in this lifetime. So, if you have your north node here, like myself, then your relationships are playing a key role in your life and you're learning about yourself through your relationships. Usually, Jupiter here can imply being attracted to somebody with wisdom, somebody who shares similar life beliefs as you do, even having many suitors for partners, but usually it blesses this area of life if Jupiter is dignified. If you have Saturn here, you're learning some tough lessons about love, but this house is ruled by Libra and Saturn is exalted in Libra. So I feel like it does bring rewards, like through a long lasting, solid relationship, usually later on in life. Sometimes they even find their partner when they're younger and they just stay with them forever. So it plays out differently. If you have Pluto here, you can attract people who get obsessed with you, who stalk you. It really reminds me of like the You guy, where he's just like stalking all of his romantic interests. So it's kind of that vibe. That's what you attract.
And
People
he
who
has
are
so
like,
many Scorpio placements in real life.
yeah, he's a Scorpio stellium, and
Like,
he with Pluto and Scorpio.
he's thoroughly Scorpio.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, kind of self explanatory having Pluto there. If you have the moon there, you usually experience most of your emotions through your relationships, or nothing ignites more feeling in you than your partner, your marriage partner, especially. It's like having a Libra moon. So it can play out differently depending on what the planets are. And with synastry, We typically want somebody who has the energy of the sign and the planets that's in the seventh house. So let's say you have like Saturn and Uranus there. Usually you're attracted to Aquarius like partners, because those are the rulers of Aquarius. But they don't necessarily have to have planets in our seventh house. I personally prefer that they don't, just because of its connection to open enemies. So I have my North Node there, so I've really had to study this house very well. But what do you guys have in the seventh house?
I have Gemini, which is very obvious to me, like how I see it play out in my life, but I don't have placements there.
What about you, Pierre?
I have Aquarius in the seventh house, and I have my Sun and Venus there, and Juno there.
That's
That's
So,
important
awesome.
house.
Yeah, so you exist in that area of life mostly.
I mean, that's what they say, but I mean, I guess I can see it, for me, I think my seventh house has had a lot to do with work, though, because
Mm.
because Venus rules my midheaven. So, and I can see how like partnerships are important for me, but I have this theory like the more planets you have in the seventh house, the harder um or the more delay you have with relationships because those planets sometimes rule other houses. So
Mhm.
the the things that those rulers are trying to do and other things bring relationships into those areas. So it kind of like if you're talking about love relationships or other contractual relationships, it would get dispersed because you're like dealing with so many other things. I don't know, that's just a theory for me because, like you see people in social media, they're like, "Well, I have all these planets in the 7th house and I don't have relationships." And it's probably a lot because of that. There's just there are more complications when you have more planets in that house.
You also have Vesta on your ascendant, which I think contributes to delay in that area.
Or you're in a relationship with yourself,
True.
or you just enjoy, you complete yourself and enjoy your own company. I don't know, because I don't have planets here, but I have heard having the sun here can be kind of hard because the sun is in detriment in Libra, so it's
True.
kind of like that.
I mean, it's
Um,
not hard. I wouldn't say it's hard. I have when I have really good relationships is I have Sun conjunct Venus, even though the Venus is combust. Like I meet great people and stuff, I mean, I do have a Saturn ruled seventh house. So,
Mm.
when
Oh, I'm sure
Saturn
that plays a part.
rules, yes, people with Leo rising or Cancer rising often have delayed relationships or,
Something
something like
about
that.
Saturn though, I've seen multiple times when there was Saturn in the seventh house and they got married or found their life partner very young. So I
Yeah.
think it doesn't always mean delay.
Yeah, I don't have
It
Saturn in the 7th house, though. I have
yeah,
y but
I get it.
but that's the same thing, like, for me, I have Saturn in the 10th house,
Right.
and I had good career. So, like, a lot of times people that is an important distinction because a lot of people will say Saturn in the house will delay things, but oftentimes, if it gets activated at a certain time, yes, you can have it sooner.
Right.
Mhm.
I think it also just adds seriousness, like, you take those relationships seriously, which would result in a early marriage sometimes.
or even like going into business with your spouse or your
Mhm.
partner, or there's just more of a focus on business relationships. I
Right.
see that a lot when Capricorn is on the cusp of the seventh house, especially if like the North Node is there too. Usually there's a focus on building business relationships. So I can totally see how that would have played out more so career wise for
Yeah,
you? I mean, we're
because
kind of in
my
like,
the ruler, because it's important, like, to the ruler of my 7th house is in the 10th house.
Mhm.
So, that's, that's what you wanna do is look at where the ruler is, and often y and one of the things that I learned is the ruler of the 7th house represents your partner, and like Mary said in the beginning, it's not that, oh, it's going to be, this Capricorn person, but you have to think about the qualities of that person. And then if it's in a certain house, that can represent what the person does, or it can represent where you meet them. It can represent whatever the qualities of the sign are. Um, so it can show up in a lot of ways.
For Gemini, Mary has taught me that, you know, people with Gemini on the 7th house are attracted to younger people, and I always date younger.
oh yeah, I know so many Sagittarius risings that date younger, like male or female. Actually, it even goes the same for the other way around.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where if you're a Gemini rising too, you can still be attracted to like younger. Um, if you're Cancer rising, sometimes you go for older, somebody that's more of like a father figure. But I kind of
Sometimes
have a
it's younger
similar,
too. Saturn can be the opposite as well. It's
Hmm.
usually
yeah,
more, I
yeah,
like to
it's
say, age difference.
exactly, because it rules time. So it could go, they could be into way younger or way older. That was the case for, I have a similar thing to you, Pierre, because the ruler of my seventh house is in Capricorn. Also, Venus is in Capricorn for me. So I've definitely had relationships where they were a lot older or they just had more authority, like at work or just even over me. But and I also feel like my better relationships were delayed. Like I
Mhm.
met them later in life.
Mhm.
So that's very Saturnian, I feel like, as well. Um, but yeah, so with the fifth house, too, usually you can tell the person's type or at least what they're unconsciously attracted to. Sometimes we're not attracted to the sign that's on the seventh house.
Right.
Other times it represents who's attracted to us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're attracted to them as well.
It
I've
can
Um,
noticed
also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Chase.
Oh, thank you. I've noticed for me, my friends have Gemini placements, like platonic friends, like female friends, and then the guys I date do not have Gemini placements, but actually they usually have Virgo placements, so it's
well, you're
Yeah,
interesting.
Mars and Virgo.
I do. I have Mars and Virgo.
and I was gonna say that the sign can be, the qualities that you like in a
Right.
relationship, or how your relationships often show up, or maybe it's even things you hadn't thought about, like, because, Mary was saying in the beginning that the 7th house can be unconscious things about yourself, and so, because you're projecting from the 1st house. So you might not
Yeah,
think you have it.
exactly. It's like the stuff that you kind of disown and then you look for
Mhm.
them in the other person. I like
Mhm.
that explanation. I feel like personally I think the hardest placement to have here is Uranus, or
Mm,
Uranus, if it's making hard aspects, can make it like impossible to have anything long term. Like relationships come into your life so quickly and then they exit your life so quickly. The other one that I think is difficult here is the South Node. The South Node, because they have such a strong desire for relationships, but all of their relationships end up not working out, or at least the majority of them, until they embody the North Node, which is being independent, putting themselves first, and you know, getting to the point where they really are happy alone. And then sometimes they meet that person, but it's so hard for them. I know from like the personal readings that I do, usually, when they have the South Node in the seventh house, their first question is, well, when am I going to meet my soulmate? I've had so many karmic relationships. But that's part of that because there's too much of a focus on the relationships thing. And for me, having my North Node here is the same thing, except the opposite, where I have a high reluctance to be in relationships and I feel like I lose myself and I prefer very much to be on my own and independent, but the universe very much kind of forces me to be in relationships throughout my life. And there's always something that like forces me to get into a relationship, and you learn the most about yourself through your relationships with the North or South Node in the seventh house. With the seventh house, like Pierre said, you have to look at the ruler, you have to look at how the ruler is interacting with the rest of the chart. It's never, you have to follow the thread. Like, it's never just going to give you, who your soulmate's going to be. There are many other things to consider.
Yeah. And
For
with
me,
that
it doesn't.
Uranus, oh,
Go ahead. You go ahead. Your
with
turn.
with that Uranus in the seventh house, or Uranus, related to other relationship planets, I always say, you know, um, you really have to think about trying not to fit your relationship into the societal norm. Because
Mhm.
if you can say, all right, well, I don't really want that anyway, I don't want this sort of, Wonder Bread type relationship, that you probably can make a relationship stick. You know what I mean? It's just you have to work within the energy of Uranus, which says, maybe you schedule freedom times, or maybe you don't live together, all of the time, or something like that, whatever it is.
Maybe
When
you're
you work,
polyamorous. I'm just
or
kidding.
something like that,
It's very possible.
whatever that energy means for you. I think when, it's like you said, Mary, when you start accepting what the energy is, then things can work out a little better. But it does take, it takes some practice and time with that.
Yeah, you just need like an unconventional
Hmm.
relationship.
Unconventional.
Um,
Hmm.
or you're into polyamory, which is cool. That's what you're
If
into.
that's your thing. But
Um,
yeah, but
yeah,
usually they're going to have that, so that is going to be cool for them.
or also Chiron here in the seventh house. So I actually heard another astrologer talk about how they did studies, and people who have Chiron in the seventh are like most likely to be unfaithful in their relationships. And I was just kind of confused
Ariana
because
Grande.
really,
Yeah.
I mean, I know like Chiron in Libra, so maybe it's the same thing. I don't know, but I also think that another way it can manifest is you attract partners who wound you, or you can have a fear of commitment, or the complete opposite to codependence, where you like latch on for dear life. So
Hmm.
that's a hard one.
For me, it
Um,
doesn't seem like the qualities of my seventh house are something I disown. I embrace it, I think, like, because I think it says that I need intellectual conversation in my close relationships, which is so true. Also, since I have, prominent Scorpio placements, I want a deep bonded long-term relationship, but with a mutable sign on the seventh house, I have not had that. So I think that checks out for me.
Yeah, and I mean that's also kind of how it ties into the eighth house. Like such a big difference as far as how you feel
Mm.
when somebody activates your seventh house versus your eighth house. The eighth house, you get so like weak in the knees, obsessed, like they totally trigger your like fight or flight instincts. Whereas the seventh house is more of a just like, Libra, a natural harmony and compatibility type of energy. Um, or you
Well,
can end up enemies too.
yeah, and the seventh house is also about contracts. So, that's that's part of why it's marriage, because it's sort of like the contractual obligations, also with business partners or any other type of thing. We also have lawsuits can be, you know, be represented in the seventh house. So I think a lot of these, some of these significations can come up if you're doing things like horror, or, like other types of techniques where it kind of makes more sense, or transits and things like that.
Yeah, and it's funny because Saturn's transiting my seventh house right now. And with the whole Saturn transiting the seventh house, every astrologer is just like, well, you're probably going to break up or you're going to end a relationship or it's going to test your relationships and stuff. But I think for me, because the ruler of my seventh house is in Capricorn, I
Mm,
actually feel like it's brought me so many great relationships, especially business relationships. And when Saturn conjuncted my North Node, that's kind of when I also had like a huge I saw lots of growth
mhm.
with my social media platform and lots of people getting ratings with me. So I feel like
Well,
it's been a positive so far.
and that
But
is another. Oh, I'm sorry to
no, go
interrupt you.
ahead, go ahead.
That is another I just wanted to, because well, that's how my mind works, so I'm sorry. Uranus
You're
in the
good.
3rd house. I gotta say it right now. But that is something, another signification of the 7th house is your public, your relationship to the public. So
Interesting.
that makes that's, I think that's some older one. I have to look in the book, but that makes total sense, that happened for you in the 7th house, even though a lot of people don't think of it as your public. So a lot of people who have fame can also have things a lot in the 7th house as well.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I've also heard that by one astrologer who I actually really agree with a lot of things that he says, but he said that people see you as your descendants more so than your ascendant. And I was just like, I feel like I act a lot more like my descendant, but I don't know if I'm biased because of my North Node being there.
I could see people viewing me as Gemini.
Yeah, it's hard
Yeah.
for me to say because
Well,
I've
yeah,
got
because
You're a
you're
my
there.
sun.
ascendant and my 10th house ruler there, so
I feel like for I you give very much Aquarius Libra vibes because your son's also in a Libra degree, so
I
yeah,
it's like
agree. I
very,
agree.
yeah.
very like that kind of likable Libra
Yeah, I have
energy.
Venus is, I think, very strong in my in my chart, so, yeah.
I don't you also have Venus at a Libra degree too?
I think it's Aquarius degree.
Um, I love Venus's at an Aquarius degree. It's like my favorite degree for Venus.
Yeah,
Uh,
my Venus, we talked in my session with Mary, book a session with Mary.
Book with Mary.
oh god,
We
the book a
she
session with Pierre too, and with Chase.
Yeah, we talked about that, how, like, when I was coming in, I said, "I'm just gonna have a very, very very, very Aquarius Venus." It's it's Venus in Aquarius at an Aquarius degree.
Oh, that's
That's
funny
the
because
best.
my Venus is Scorpio at a Scorpio degree.
Yeah,
Um, I have
committed.
Venus.
Oh yeah,
Mine's
big
in a
time.
Scorpio degree too. Scorpio degrees suck. I'm not gonna lie when it comes to Venus.
I love it.
The themes of it are there. I don't like it. I'd
I'm a
rather
huge
have
fan.
the Aquarius degree and have that like amazing friendship with people and all of that. So
I'm like merge souls with me.
yeah, well, I really experienced like the impact of that degree, but mine's also in Capricorn. So we all know what happens when you get Pluto and Saturn together. It's never good. um, it really isn't. I mean, isn't the Pluto Saturn conjunction like what started the whole COVID thing?
I thought it was Pluto, Saturn. Yeah, Saturn in Aquarius.
I thought it was the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, but then the day Saturn entered Aquarius, the lockdown began.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
so there are, I mean, I think, you look at Saturn and Uranus, and then Pluto is also fits in there to, activate other parts of that Saturn Uranus cycle. The Saturn Uranus one is pretty interesting. But anyway,
There's a
yeah.
whole like movie. There's a whole like series on
Yeah, Richard
Uranus and
Tarnas.
Pluto making aspects.
That's
I
it.
watched one episode.
Richard Tarnas, was that the something of the gods or
Gods
something?
of Changing of the Gods.
God,
Was it?
something like that. It's
Yeah.
terrible. I don't, but yeah, we're talking about the same thing.
Cool, cool, cool.
what do you guys think about having Mars in the seventh house?
That'd be
It's
good.
Well, I think a lot of people, I what I've seen is sometimes those people end up having, conflicts with people, and they just really don't understand,
Mm,
why, because they're just like they're passionate about relationships, but then, um, that might be part of the, um, I really need to take a look at myself and see, like, where am I being, like, a little aggressive, because they'll have conflicts and they're just like, "I don't get it. I don't get it." But
that's how I
Yeah.
am at work.
yeah.
I'm like, why does everyone hate me?
But I mean, it's gonna obviously depend on the sign and
Yeah.
other aspects, but, you know, I feel like everybody can eventually if you like, if you study your astrology and figure out what the dynamics are, you can make it work. But Mars can be very, one of the significations is cutting and, just kind of like ending things. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So I think some of those people find that their relationships may, just end. They either from them or other people might just cut them off, sort of quickly.
I would
Another
assume.
thing another thing I noticed is if you have a planet in your 7th house, you attract somebody who has that planet in their 1st house.
Hmm.
I see that a lot. And I want to also talk about Lilith in the 7th house because we're not on TikTok and we could like actually talk about sex. But people, because Lilith in the 7th house or even Lilith in Libra, um, when you have Lilith in the 7th house, let's start with that. You attract people who are just very toxic. Like they're so, so toxic and they show you so many red flags, but you just cannot help the lure and you're so drawn to them. But you attract like Lilith like partners. I know from my own husband, he has Lilith here, but I also made a video about it on TikTok and everybody was just seconding it and they dealt with the same exact theme where they're constantly attracting people. Another way it could play out is that you're attracted to people who are like overly sexual, like very kind of open sexually and like because Lilith is like that wild rebellious woman that refused to like lay under Adam or that whole myth. So when men have it in the 7th house, like they're attracted to like women who usually work in like the sex industry, like even like porn stars or women who are just very, very sexual. So it's funny though, because my husband has Lilith here, and it's in Pisces, so it's like softer.
Mm.
And he likes like cosplay stuff and whatever. But I have Lilith in my 1st house, so I see that a lot where you attract somebody who has a planet or an asteroid that you have in your 7th house. They have it in their 1st house, so it's like kind of the same thing because it's like an image or a snapshot of what you're attracted to, whatever is in your 7th house.
So my
So
close friend, she has Lilith and Eros in the 7th house in Sagittarius. And her top three, she's like the most normal person, like normal, chill person. The people she's attracted to are crazy. Her top three celebrity crushes are like the most wildly problematic people.
yeah, it's like your type is toxic, literally.
Yes,
Like
and every time she has a boyfriend, I'm like, why do you pick the most pretentious assholes? I like so many people. Like, I like most people. I never like her boyfriends.
they can't help it. They can't help it. They attract people who are just so like and people who like do not love them back too and or
Terrible.
people who are just like you the one that you would least expect them to like with Lilith there. So that one's an honorable mention for sure. But yeah, if you have an empty 7th house, a lot of people ask me this, like, oh,
Mhm.
does that mean I'm not going to be in a relationship in this lifetime? No, because you have to look at the ruler, just like
Mhm.
Pierre said in the beginning. It's never just looking at the house. You're not going to get answers that way. You have to look at the ruler. You have to look at where the ruler is, how it's interacting with the rest of the chart. You have to look for Venus. There's a lot that you have to kind of piece together to get the full story or the full picture. Usually transits are the annual perfection year if you're having it for the seventh house, or you're having like a prominent transit like the North Node or Jupiter transiting your seventh house. Those are usually windows to meet somebody,
Saturn.
especially with the North Node.
The ruler of my seventh house is in my second house, and I've struggled most of my life with over identifying myself with my close friends. Like, I grew up being very, very codependent in my close relationships, and even dating, just becoming like, and that's Scorpio too, but I think that I can see that playing out that way.
Another thing that does that is Neptune in the seventh house, or you never see people clearly. And your relationships are so confusing, and you're always deceived because you see them through rose-colored glasses. So that one sucks, and I'm having it transiting there right now. So
Oof.
Fun.
Till 2025.
Yep.
Then it moves in your eighth house.
Which is even worse, but okay.
Yep. Not gonna get better. Oof.
Well, I think this is a good spot to end.
Oh yeah, it went so fast. Last time I checked, it was 13 minutes in. All right, we're gonna go record our weekly forecast. Check it out. Not as many people listen to it as I wanted, so do it.
It's only been one episode.
Do it. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
later.